Oh, yes. The coffee is good this morning. I want to talk about conversations today. So, talking about talking, I guess that's what it's going to be. I'm using my Pettigene State Park mug again, and I cannot remember how much of the story of Pettigene I ever shared with you guys. And so I'm not going to dig too deep, but I do have a little bit of the story of Pettigene. So in Arkansas, you have Pettigene State Park. And, on our honeymoon, we went there, and we were there a couple years ago with the boys. And when we were there with the boys, we spent some time trying to figure out why it's named Pettigene. And so what we discovered was that in the 1700s, there was a sailor who was about to go on an adventure over to America, and I don't have the entire, if he was part of the ship's captain, or it was something like that. He was some captain or something on this project, and they were going to go over to the New World, and they were going to explore. Well, it was at the time it was part of what was it? The Louisiana. It was not the Louisiana. I'm confusing myself. The Louisiana Territory. I wanted to call it the Louisiana Purchase. And I'm like, no, because it was Louisiana Purchase when we purchased it later. So it was Louisiana Territory, and so they were going to go there. Well, he had a young fiance, and so this girl wanted to go along on this. She didn't want to be separated from her fiance, and so she cut her hair and got dressed up as a cabin boy and got a job as a cabin boy on the ship of the expedition that he was on. And so she was known on the ship as Little John, or Pettigene. And so they come all the way. They're in the Louisiana Territory now. They're exploring, and they make it all the way up there to Arkansas. And up there in Arkansas, as they're exploring that area, she becomes deathly ill and discovers herself to her fiance before she dies. He knows that his fiance followed him. And so the amount of intrigue that happens right there for me, when I'm thinking, okay, so she was disguised and along with her fiance, they were on a boat with all these other men. Like, was she disillusioned by the guy by the time she saw him with other men and sailors? Did she respect and admire him more? I don't know. To me, it was such a risky thing on so many levels. Anyway, and so I think of my own marriage and how many times that Stacy and I, where I've just been like, no, I want Stacy to come along, and so we will work hard to bring Stacy along on whatever I'm doing, and we try to do things together as a family. But I also try to be the very same person I am all the time, not just when I'm with her and somebody else when I'm not. So I think it's intriguing, the legend and the naming of Pettigene State Park, the stories that it hints at, that here was a girl that wanted to be with her man so badly, and they weren't married yet, so she faked it. And I don't know how she managed that he didn't recognize her voice, except for, and this is my point, maybe they really didn't have enough conversations. Maybe they really didn't know each other that well at the time. So this little French woman, Pettigene, the way we remember her, this is the mug I got when I was at Pettigene State Park. We recently came back from our time in Texas with our family, and we just had a really good time there. I really enjoy the conversations that I get to have with all of my family now on that side. Good morning, Joe. Thanks for tuning in. And so I wanted to share a little bit from what happened. So, okay, growing up, we had sandboxes, and we played in the sand in our sandboxes. And I remember getting a little mold, and we'd try to make little castles and stuff. But I haven't made anything comparative to what this family makes. So on Sunday afternoon, when we were there, the we had a it was a competition supposed to be, but it turns out it was just we had different groups of people making some really good sandcastles. So I want to show some of these to you because I just think they do an amazing job. So here are just some of my photos, and for instance, this let's see, this group of well, they're not all there, but this group of kids, they made this sandcastle. Just look at all of these arches that they made with sand. Like they made these, and this sandcastle stayed there for like 3 days until some of the kids that built it actually knocked it down. Um, Here, I think here might be the full group that was working on it. So Peter was there; he was working on it, and so they made this. They call it Atlantis, the lost city of Atlantis, and so they made this sandcastle. I was very impressed by that. But Stacy and some of her siblings worked on this other one. Let's see. I thought, well, here's while they're working on it. So they're building this from Lord of the Rings, and so very detailed. They were there's a lot of work that goes into when they're carving and making these things. But here, there's the group that's left. There were two others I think that were working on it as well. But this was Stacy and some of her siblings and that were working on it. So I took several photos of it for them. They wanted the picture this way. I didn't like how flat this top part came at the lighting, so I convinced them to go to the other side here in a minute. And I took another picture. Sorry if it's making you dizzy. I'm clicking through these too fast. I had them switch. Well, here I tried to get the angle a little bit better, but you can see that city from Lord of the Rings. And then here we go, switched here, because now you can totally see all the details that are down there. Just absolutely phenomenal. And I'm always just amazed at the stuff that they build with sand. And from the beginning, I mean, there was so much. I don't know that I'd ever really made a large sandcastle until I met this family, and then since then it's what we do when we go to the beach. They make big sandcastles. So we had a lot of fun. We ended up spending quite a bit of time on the beach, and we spent some time exploring. We played mini golf together and some things like that. But all in all, what was just really standing out to me was the absolute importance of being able to talk and being able to have conversations. And so I was thinking when I walked up to the kitchen this morning, was just looking around for the mugs to see what I had that would be useful as a conversation mug, and this Pettigene mug just popped out to me because here were two people who supposedly loved each other. They were fiancé, is what we were told, and so but she couldn't say I want to go with you, and there was no option left. She had to go to intrigue and deception in order to come along, but then they couldn't talk. So I've just imagined that ship coming across the ocean to explore the Louisiana Territory, and like, is this little cabin boy hanging out where she can hear her fiance a lot? Like, what's going on in that little heart, that young heart? I'm just telling you what, though, conversation is way better than intrigue. And so when I think about the necessity of being able to talk through things, oh, looks like I got a guest here. Hold on. I got Moonlight and Peter.
Yep, we're keeping this kitty because
So
Moonlight, he's like people, except they live a little bit shorter, and they can't have babies after a little while like people. They can only have them for a few years of their life, and we've had Starlight for a few years, so we're keeping her. So that when Starlight stops having babies, she'll be able to have more babies, and we won't have to get a new kitten. So
the idea is we got Starlight from my Aunt Ruby and her Amish place there in Indiana, and so Hudson was in charge of the kitten, and so they've been raising some kittens, and so over the past couple of years, Starlight has had several litters of kittens, and now Moonlight is one from the last one, and so we decided to keep one of those and not rehome all of them. So hopefully in the future, Moonlight will also have some. We have Starlight? Moonlight? What are we going to have next? Sunlight?
I don't know. It depends on what the kitten looks like.
Flashlight?
We named Starlight after the in not Little Britches, Farmer Boy.
Oh, Farmer Boy. Okay, that's
his
who you named.
cat, Moonlight. So,
Starlight or Moonlight?
Starlight.
Yeah. So Almanzo had a calf named Starlight.
Mhm.
Okay. So now we have a cat named Starlight.
Also, one of those cameras.
Yeah. No, they're both. Oh yeah, I see. That one's running low on battery. It's okay. The other one's good. I just replaced the other battery. All right. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
So what happened on the way home from our trip is also what made me think about talking about conversations. We had made my van, our little minivan was running really well, and we'd managed to get everything in it this time. And so I had here we are underneath the bridge down at the Canadian River in Texas, and we stop here quite frequently. There's like a little campsite off to the side, and this time the water was a little higher than usual, but we often stop here just to let the boys run around and play. And it used to be long before it was a 4-lane highway. There was a little there, and the pieces of it are still there, where they had built a stairway down where you could climb down and see. But now it's completely hidden by the vines and the bushes, and you wouldn't even know anything was there. But you can still, when you realize it, you see, oh, there was a little parking lot picnic area that used to be in the median now, in between, when it was just one highway. And so anyway, we stopped here at the Canadian River. So as we were moving away from here, I was just so grateful because the van had been running really well. And I even mentioned it to Stacy how much the van was just running really well. And I had it, I'm about 230,000 miles on that thing now. And so I was just really pleased. And we went a little bit farther. We got into Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, they had some road construction. And as I was waiting for our turn to get by on a one-way road, I kept thinking there was something odd about the way the engine was running. And so I kept listening. And then a few minutes later, because we have so many children with us, and because we had stopped so long waiting on the road construction, we had to pull over to the side of the road for some emergency stopping. And so I pull over on a little ranch road, and as we're in there, I'm just again noticing that the engine is running a little funny. And so as I come out of there to get back on the road, the engine is definitely knocking. It's definitely got like something's going on. And so I just a mile or so down the road, there was a little truck stop, and I pull in there. I look at everything. We're in the middle of nowhere at this point, but the engine is definitely knocking. And so I go into the truck stop. There's the local guys are there, and one of them says, well, I'll follow you up the 28 miles to the next town because that's the way I'm headed, and I'll just make sure you get up there. And he had a 4-door pickup, so I thought, well, he can get us a ride to the next little town if something goes wrong. So we get on the road, and at first I was able to go 70, then it's kind of 65. Like the engine, I could accelerate just as much as I wanted to. That was not the problem. It was just that it was knocking and it was being a problem. And so we made it to Springfield, Colorado. And in Springfield, there's several little hotels and stuff. So we were discussing, well, what do we do now? And so I did a little more digging into the engine, and just definitely seems like something on the bottom side of that engine is knocking. Must be a loose bearing, must be something coming apart in there. And so I don't want to drive it until it explodes, because then we'll be left sitting beside the road. So, because the engine, it's still running, so I could just keep limping home. It still was 4.5 hours from Springfield. And so we looked around and we made a few decisions. There were several hotels in town, and we were coming home a day earlier than we'd originally planned. So I thought, well, that works. So we actually pulled in to we got a hotel. So Stacy and the boys were staying at a hotel, and then I literally hopped on the road and started hitchhiking a ride. And so what was fascinating for me about hitchhiking a ride was, who's gonna pick you up? That's the question. And so what it amounts to is the people that will pick you up while you're hitchhiking. It's not the sophisticated folks. It's not all those. It was, I was looking for an old country boy. That's what I was looking for. And so the first guy picked me up. He was an old country boy. He was a Navy veteran, and he had grown up in that area. And he was like, "Well, you didn't seem to have a lot of baggage with you, so I thought you must be local." So he picked me up. So we chatted, and so I tried to have different conversation, but we were in an older pickup that needed some work done to it, and the heater was stuck on hot, so the windows had to be opened just a little bit. And so later he figured out how to shut the heater off a little bit, but he took me 100 miles up to where the direction he was going. And so that was a huge blessing. So he took me up that way, maybe not 100. Yeah, it was an hour and I don't know. Anyway, he took me a chunk of the way. And what was interesting about that ride was I tried to ask questions and to be conversational, but I think he must have been hard of hearing or something, because he couldn't always hear what I asked or said. And so he ended up just telling me stories of his life, of being in the Navy and, being off the coast of Alaska, of going over to communist China, he just told me how many times he got kicked out of high school because of stealing cars and other stuff they used to do for joyriding. And he just told me all kinds of stuff. And I mean, I felt like I just don't have much in common with this guy. He just was a completely different kid than I was. But he kept telling me stories, and so I kept listening and asking questions as much as we could. Well, he dropped me off, and I was back on the road hitchhiking again. And a little bit later, another guy picks me up. Now, this guy was a truck driver. He was from Mexico originally, but in the 80s, he'd come across up to here, had been working here. He'd driven truck in Mexico and in the United States. He lived up here close to where we live, about 30 minutes away. And he was actually in his personal vehicle coming back from Florida. And so we were driving along, and Sylvester we just started having conversation. And what I was really impressed with was this was a conversation. This wasn't him just telling me stories. And this wasn't just me trying to make conversation. We were actually talking. He would share something. I would share something. He would ask questions about my life. I would ask questions about his life. We talked about everything. We had highly intellectual, intelligent conversation about so many things. And so we probably have things that we disagree on. We might be different politically in some ways. But what was fascinating to me is how much we found that we both had some touch point on. And so, he asked me questions that he'd been discussing with a group of truckers. He had a group of trucker friends, and he was like, one's an atheist, one's a Catholic, one's a Protestant, and then there's himself, who's like Christian but not too much Christian. And so we were just chatting about so much. And I was just so impressed, because first of all, he told me later in the ride, he's like, "I don't even know why I picked you up." And I thought, well, partly because I was praying. But when I got home, so this was my conversations that I had with the guys who drove me was one set of things. And I really enjoyed it. Like Sylvester and I, the only common thing we had was we were trying to go north on the same road at the same time. And so he is picking me up, but he is in the position where he has a ride. I don't at the moment. And then we have to start from scratch there. Hi, I'm Joseph. Hi, I'm Sylvester. Hi, where are you going? I'm trying to go here. Where are you? Okay. And so, like, here, you want a bottle of water? Like, we start with zero knowledge of each other. And so it took real conversation to get to know each other. But it was awesome. I enjoyed it. I think most people would enjoy that sort of conversation that we had. So then I get home, eventually. We get the car, I come home, get the Suburban. I go back down, get a tow dolly, put the van on the tow dolly. We bring the car home. I think I have the pictures of here's the car. Here's the car at the hotel when I get it on the tow dolly. We're getting it all ready to go. And then there we are on our way back. Little Miss Corey is just so adorable these days. It was a windy day. Lots of pictures of Miss Corey. Here I am driving down the road, looking in the rearview mirror there. then we're home. So there we are. We've finally made it back to the house. So that's the whole story. I got back to the house, but then what was funny was over the next several days, I'm chatting with different people, and as we were chatting, and I would say, "Oh yes, I hitchhiked home." The looks that I got of horror and other shock and surprise and like concern and genuine, like so many people were like, "Say what, you hitchhiked home?" And so I had more conversations after the fact because of the fact that I hitchhiked. And it was just something about it that where in our current society, I said, well, I used to do it. I said, my dad used to do it all the time in the 80s. And they were like, yeah, but that was the 80s. I'm like, were people not wicked and sinful in the 80s also? Did we not have concerns then? And so I was thinking about it. And this was actually when I was standing out there beside the road and I was asking for a ride. I remembered that less than 20 years ago, when I was single and was driving all over the place, there were a lot of times when I would be in the car for such long periods of time by myself that it just started bothering me how I didn't like being by myself. So there were a number of trips, and I remember especially my 1985 Nissan Sentra that I was driving all over the place. And that car would have been 15, 16 years old at the time. So 2001, 2002, that time frame. And so I just remember I would on purpose leave the front passenger seat empty and clear it out as if someone was sitting there. And then I would say, Lord, I'm reserving a seat for you. You can do whatever you want with that seat. And so then I would drive. And so now it made it real for me. I would say, Lord, what do you think? And I just have conversations with Jesus because I had reserved a seat for him. Well, then I'd be driving, and I remember one time I was up in Oklahoma City, or maybe I was headed to Oklahoma City, and I see a guy, he's thumbing a ride, and he's trying to get somewhere. So I pull over, I pick him up, and away we go, and we start chatting. Well, what turned out is he was coming back down from one of the northern states, like Michigan, and his father had died, and he had gotten the word with not enough time, so that by the time he hitchhiked all the way back up to Michigan, he got there a day too late for the funeral. And so now he was coming back down, and I find out he's a homeless guy that's been living in. So I must have picked him up before we got to Oklahoma City because I dropped him off down in Oklahoma City somewhere. He was a homeless guy coming back down to Oklahoma City after having been up there. And so I think we rode together for 4 hours that time. And I just remember the conversation I had with him. At the time, I felt like we were so many worlds apart. But the one thing we had in common was that we both loved our fathers, and his father was now dead, and he had missed the funeral. He had missed so many things. And so on top of the grief of having missed his father, he of having lost his father was just the inability to actually honor his father and be there at the funeral. And that was one guy. I picked up multiple different people, but I just remember how many times I would be loading my car and I'd start stacking things in everywhere, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, I've got to leave that seat for Jesus. And so I would clean out the front seat and try to get it clean enough for people to be sitting in, for someone to sit in it. And I say, Lord, that's your seat. What do you want to do with it? And so when I was out hiking the other day and asking for a ride, that was part of what I was saying. So, Lord, I really need a ride right now. And I had actually stopped at one of the little filling stations / truck stops and had chatted with people in there. There was no one coming up this way from there. So I just went back on the road, and it was, the sun was going to be setting soon, and it was going to get dark soon. And I thought, well, if I don't get a ride, I'm in so much trouble. Now I brought a light along, and I had a coat along, and I had water, and I had food, and so I'm like, I can walk 100 miles if I have to. I don't know if I could, but the idea is there. I was willing to. And so, but I just remembered as I was walking, I said, Lord, there were all those times when I was driving that I had reserved that seat for you, and you used it. You would let me pick up people, and that was a blessing. And even since we've been married, Stacy and I have several times picked up people in different times. Sometimes students that were trying to come back from skiing or things like that. And so we try to be personable in that. And every time when you pick someone up like that, you get the opportunity for some really awesome conversation. But I was wondering, like, what is the aversion or the concern that people have with hitchhiking? Like, when you hear that I was hitchhiking, like, you probably have some, oh, you shouldn't do that. But people do Uber, Lyft, taxis, all other kinds of stuff. Why don't we ask out of the need of our heart for the kindness of someone else's heart to help us? And it has to do with the fact that we're concerned. We're concerned about what that other person might be. And I get it. But I wonder, too, if some of it is that we're not used to having conversations where we literally know nothing about each other, and we have to learn to respect and talk with someone, even if we are completely worlds apart in what we believe. How do we share? And so when I think about sharing my faith, it's not that I'm pushing it on you, but I need to be able to chat with you and ask you questions. How are you doing? What do you believe? And I need to share from what I believe and what's going on. And that's what Sylvester and I did. We talked about things. He talked about his church experiences. I shared my experiences with Jesus. It was good. So, are we scared of hitchhiking? Or are we actually scared of conversation with people we don't know? What's really at stake here? So, go find someone to talk to. And if you already have a spouse or a fiance or someone else, people in your life, don't treat them like a cabin boy, like Petty Jean. Yeah, Seth, thanks for jumping on here. I think we are scared of the unknown. I think that's it. We're scared of uncertainty, because that was one of the things that when I got out there on the road, I was like, Lord, I don't like this because I don't control the outcomes here. When I'm asking for a ride, like, I can see nice cars going by, I can see beat up cars going by, and I almost knew immediately that it wasn't going to be one of the nice cars that was going to pull over. It was going to be a car that needed a little bit of work. And so the first car that pulled over, part of the conversation and stories he told me was how all the different ways he had wrecked his 3 previous vehicles, and how this one had been wrecked, but he was getting it back to working again. I'm like, wait, I'm in your car now, and you wrecked 3 other cars? Oh my. So, but yeah, I think it is a fear of the unknown. And so here's the challenge with that is, we don't know what we don't know. And so when we are afraid of it, then we don't find out what's on the other side of that conversation, of that interaction. And it's always worth recognizing that our King knows everyone. He knows the future. He knows other things. And so if we're walking with him and we walk into strange circumstances, he's with us because he indwells us. He's there. So we can walk in the power of Christ, and we can do unknown things and not only survive them, but we can enjoy them. And for someone like me who likes to tell stories, it is like I learned things out there on the road with these 2 guys, and it was great. So hopefully I won't get stuck where I have to hitchhike again anytime soon. But if I do, I'll do it. And I'll look forward to the conversation that might be had. So don't be afraid of the conversations. Press in, ask questions. And if you think someone else should be talking to you more than they are, just realize that you can start the conversation. If you think they should start the conversation with you, well, maybe conversation with them. Don't be afraid to start the conversation. It's worth talking. It's worth being real. And in the end, much of our relationship with Jesus ought to be a conversation as well. See you guys next week.